Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Was there really a wartime UFO incursion over Los Angeles in 1942? How can you tell a real UFO photo from a fake one? How can you tell what's really in a photo at all?
Hello and welcome aboard to the 820th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. And I'm Ben, and those photogenic questions came from my co-host, partner in the paranormal, and dad, Paul. And today we offer a visual twist on an important subject, ironically, because it's radio, but bear with us. So we welcome your calls. The number is 401-766-1240, and that's from anywhere, or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com or contact us via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
Before introducing our guest, just a word to our viewers who are not receiving the video of this broadcast. Our subject today is a little heavy on the visual, but you can see the photos we're talking about in order on the Talking Points page for this show at BehindTheParanormal.com. Click the link at the top of the page for Talking Points pages, then click 2019 shows, and voila, the photos will spread out majestically before you. So coming to us via Skype from the UK today is Jason Gleaves. Jason is a researcher and a world-famous author on UFOs. His most recent writings include UFO Photo and the Ufology Umbrella, both from Flying Disc Press, whose publisher is a dear friend of ours, Philip Mantle, who'll be on the show in a few weeks himself.
Ah, lovely.
A native of the UK and a veteran of the Royal Air Force, Jason is considered an expert in recognizing military and civilian aircraft and armaments worldwide. He has carried out image and photo analysis for other experts worldwide as well. Jason is on social media platforms at UFOnly, UFONLY. He'll tell us more about that later. So,
Jason Gleaves, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Hi guys, thanks for the invite.
Oh, well, it's great to have you on with us. So, let's start off with something that seems like a rather simple question, but is deceptively simple. Is there any way to really tell whether a UFO photograph is genuine?
Not really. It's you've got to do your homework on any UFO photograph. I mean, I get approached by people worldwide wanting photographs analysed of UFOs, ETs, etc. And you've got to roll your sleeves up, and you've got to look more into the person that sends you the image, where they live, what locations, have they got airfields around them, and the weather conditions. There's an awful lot of things you've got to sort of eliminate before you get to the bottom of any case, really.
Yes, and we've given you no peace lately, sending a slew of photographs to you.
What do you think of this
for the
one?
show? Yeah.
So are there any principles for other anomalous photographs, like ghosts, Bigfoot, anything else in the realm of the paranormal?
I don't know if you get into that, but would some of the principles be the same as far as judging the validity of the photography?
Mm. Yeah, it could be. I think the paranormal is very, very close with ufology in a lot of different categories, and so you could tie a lot of them up together, really. They're certainly high strangeness, put it that way.
Sure. Okay. All right, so let's review some of the examples we have lined up on our Talking Points page, and Ben will very kindly show this on the screen for those watching on video. So, Jason, tell us about the Solway Spaceman photo, as it's called. And just before you do, we'll describe this for anyone who can't see it. There's a photo of a little girl, and this is taken in the UK. I believe it was in Wales. Jason can correct us on that. And there looks to be almost, one would think, a spaceman in those terms, in a white suit with a helmet standing behind her. And it's often been interpreted as something very, very strange. And then in the analysis that goes on in the pictures below that, you can see that it's not quite what it is. So can you tell us about that, Jason, please?
Yeah, it's really, it goes back through ufology, like most of us who start off in this field. You start off reading magazines, etc., and books and anything to do with ufology, and this has always been around. So when I got into analysing photographs in general, I tended to go back over the old cases and just check out whether they were real or not real. I don't really like to call them fake as such, are just more misidentified. But this was a photograph anyway. It was taken by a gentleman called Jim Templeton, and he took it of his daughter Elizabeth, and it was on the Solway Firth, which is in Carlisle in Cumberland here in the UK. And it was in 1964, so it's pre-digital. It was the old 35mm camera, that type of thing. And he took a photograph of his daughter on the hill. His wife was present with him at the time too. And at the time he said he didn't see anything that come out and unusual. It was only later when he had the images developed that he saw what looks like a spaceman above Elizabeth's head. I don't know if you can see the photograph itself. You can see an image, and again, it's just been put there in folklore ufology that this was a spaceman, and people took that as gospel and ran with it. So I just basically, like I do with most photographs, I wanted answers to it and check it out. And when I dug deeper into this case, long story short, I actually proved that it was his wife who was present on the day. There's another photograph that is not readily available to the one that people see of the spaceman above Elizabeth's head, his daughter. And in this other photograph, his wife is wearing a blue short-sleeve dress. And again, when I analysed the original photograph and did all my process of going through, added filters, you could see that it was actually a person with a very similar dress on, a short-sleeve dress that was worn by his wife on the same day.
Okay, so you're very confident in this. You didn't enhance the photo, you refined it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just applied the filters and things. When I use the Photoshop, I mean, it's not what people think Photoshop is, where you're actually changing photographs. You just add in filters and using the different types of filters that can bring out detail in a lot of photographs.
Very good. Now, did you do photography in the military?
No, not at all.
Well, actually, no. I did, but I dare say you're probably better at this sort of analysis than I am. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is a shot from 1969, and it is from the Apollo 12 UFO, I should say the Apollo 12 moon mission, which was the second mission to land on the moon, 1969, as we say, and we're looking at a photo that looks like a bright, almost disc-like UFO. It looks like a UFO.
Or if you just sort of glance at it, it looks vaguely like an American football.
Somewhat, yes.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, and then on the left is the analysis, and perhaps, and it turns out that it's I believe the third stage of the rocket that launched Apollo 12. So go ahead and tell us about that, please, Jason.
Yeah, again, this is another old photograph, again in ufology, archives, and for years people have put this forward in talks and lectures and things like that. I think Bob Dean actually put it through in one of his talks as a UFO. And me, I don't take anything for granted. So,
no.
I wanted to know the actual NASA source number, the one that was actually put forward for this was AS 1251 8553. And so easy enough, you go to the archives, you can check out a lot of these things yourself. When I went to this image, it was just a blank black screen, nothing in it at all. And I thought, well, okay, so there's no UFO here. So I just basically went left and right on the up and down on the different other archives that were there. And eventually I found something very similar to what I thought was a UFO. And you can see it there basically on the analysed image I've actually done. You can see it's just a very, very small illuminated disc-shaped object in the centre of the image that was taken by the crew of Apollo 12. And again, this number was different. Again, this is AS 1250 7341. The actual source image. And when I analysed them and went in and again used the filters, etc., you could see it was basically the third stage of the rocket that was actually jettisoned, and it partly went with them to the moon, and you can see. So I did a basic overlay, which anyone can do. It's it's not rocket science, and
see what you did there.
In them, you can see number 1, 2, and 3 of the images where I took the UFO image and I took the actual image of the third stage rocket and just overlaid both, and it was a perfect match.
Wow. All right, let's, and those who are not watching will be relieved to hear, we're just going to take a letter from a listener here, and on a case for which we do not have any illustrations posted. But,
I suppose I could always draw a couple stick figures if you'd like.
I suppose, yes. Thank you, Ben. Okay, perhaps, and this is from Peter in Bogota, Colombia.
So Peter writes to us, Jason, what is your take on the Amaury Rivera 1988 Puerto Rico case? There were photos of jet fighters intercepting a UFO. This was pre-digital photography. What would the process to determine if it was real or models be?
Well, I've not had a chance to get into this case more. I do know of the case. To large disc, followed by it's obviously a military fighter jet. And there are a couple of different images, and I will actually go into more depth when I get a chance to do this. But with anything, really, you always try and get the original source image to go from, because when certain images are actually posted online and they'll go through, so say I send it to you and you send it to somebody else, you go in second, third generation, and each time that image will degrade. So it makes it more difficult and becomes pixelated. So when you're trying to analyze it, so it's pre-digital. So we go back to the old 35mm, in that era, they're actually a better image to do, to analyze, I should say. Go on, sorry.
Oh no, I thought I might add to that, and Jason and I talked about a little bit about this case before the show, and that neither of us knew an awful lot about it. However, just as a point of interest, I was in Puerto Rico 4 years before this in the line of duty, and I was, among other things, doing some photography in the U.S. Coast Guard, which in this country is one of the forces, and there was a great deal of UFO activity. And I'm getting pictures of it, but that seems to be an ongoing scenario there. And there were rumors of a U.S. Navy destroyer that would be on station, anchored off San Juan, to keep tabs on, supposedly, on UFO activity coming and going from the Mona Passage, which is the immediately proximate body of water connecting with the Caribbean Sea, of course. And I saw that ship. Now, it could have been doing 1,000 other things, but the rumor is that it's watching for UFOs. I did, however, speak with a member of the Puerto Rican legislature who had been a witness, he and his entire family, to a craft coming out of the Mona Passage, or right off where they were having a barbecue, and they all saw this. It hovered for a bit and then zipped off into the sky, and there supposedly were military jets that were scrambled to track this. So whatever is in the photograph, there are precedents, according to witnesses anyway, for that sort of activity, military jets chasing UFOs. So, okay, so thank you for that, and thank you for the question, Peter. All right, so let's move on to our next graphic situation here. And this, I suppose, is not exactly what we're talking about as far as the other cases are concerned, but Jason, your father had an MIB experience, Men in Black experience, at some point, and you sent a photograph about that. And I presume this is a sort of an artist's conception of the event.
Yeah.
So what happened with your father with this?
Well, I've had cases, obviously I saw my first sighting with my sister, age 7, over in Liverpool in the UK here. And through my military career, obviously there's the RAF Cosford incident that happened, but other members of my family have had incidents that have happened, and when I actually got into ufology in more detail, and brought forward my father's ex-military, so he's quite a private person, and he just came out with it one day. He just said, when I was a young boy, when I was in Liverpool, I had a very strange experience, and the actual image that you can see that you're talking about is one that I've actually done myself in conjunction with my father, with all the details he gave me. So that's my father standing in the hallway, again with this tall, dark being, I say man in black because that's the way he described it to me. And he was playing in the hallway. This was during the 1950s, so there was no TV. My grandparents were in the living room, and he was running backwards and forwards into the hallway, just playing like he always did. And he said when he ran into the hallway, this tall, dark figure manifested itself through the front door, actually came through the locked front door and stood in front of him. And again, he panicked a bit, and this being, or this person, whatever you want to call it, actually beckoned him to follow him up the stairs, which of course he didn't. He did an about turn and ran back into the living room to my grandparents.
Yes.
And he said what had happened to them, and they just poo-pooed it, like a lot of people do with these type of stories. But for him to actually come out with this at the time was quite, setback really, when I actually went into detail, and this, I wanted to put it in my new book because I was doing about different kinds of close encounters and things like that.
Sure. Men in Black being associated with those who are experiencers of UFO contact in one form, even if it's just a sighting. Very, very mysterious phenomenon that, go ahead, Ben.
Well, I think it's interesting that he sort of manifested through the door. Typically, most Men in Black encounters, they'll come to the door, knock on the door, and then ask to come in. Or they'll show up in threes, and they'll just kind of grill people, and then they'll leave, rather than kind of manifesting through the door. That's actually really interesting. That's a pretty unique sort of experience there. And the fact that he remembers it so well is even more impressive.
Of course, the labels we put on these things depend, I guess, on us. But today, one might say this could have been a shadow person, Heidi Hollis's term. Yeah. So, but who knows? Very interesting, though. Okay, let's move on to another case here, graphically illustrated on our Talking Points page at BehindTheParanormal.com for the 2019 shows, and we're looking at several graphics having to do with a case of a civilian Argentine pilot. And can you tell us about that, Jason?
Yeah, this case is probably one of my favourite cases, really. I actually put this and analysed case in my first book, The UFO Photo, and it was an Argentinian pilot, and I had the footage around about 2014. If anybody wants to see the actual footage, it's on my YouTube channel, or linked on the Facebook page. It's, anyone can see it there. It's quite a unique piece of footage. And it's actually going to be aired on Paranormal Caught on Camera, I think, on the first episode of the second series soon. But I actually went in and analysed it. Anyway, this pilot was actually flying his aircraft, his light aircraft, and it was a turboprop. He was approximately 10,000 feet, and he'd actually had sightings of UFOs in the past before, but never had a camera or anything with him at the time. So on this unique occasion, he took his mobile phone with him, and it was in the early days of mobile phones. So again, the footage is not brilliant on today's spec, but it's still quite good to watch. And he sort of knew that he was going to have another sighting at some point. Anyway, he was flying. You can see the propeller going in front of him, the cloud base about 10,000 feet, and from his left-hand side, 2 UFOs buzz right in front of his aircraft, his airplane. dangerously close, and one is a long, elongated UFO followed by a shorter, smaller UFO, which you can see on the analysed frame shots that I've got taken from the original source footage. They pass to his right-hand side, and they do a figure of 8 before coming back again to buzz his aircraft in a close formation, straight off again to his left. Again, if the footage is better than me actually talking about it, you can actually see, and I've analysed it in more detail. But, you know, the actual large UFO, the elongated or cylindrical shaped craft that you can see is huge, and again by a disc shaped. It's difficult to give an exact identification of what the objects could be, because we're looking at them from an end elevation, sort of a side view straight on. So, you know, they could have been a triangular shaped or something else with a side view, but they're certainly unique, and it's one of my favourite pieces of footage.
Certainly this is a common occurrence with pilots, commercial pilots, when they dare to report these things. We'll often talk about close calls with objects that look very much like this one, either cigar-shaped or even tube-shaped, this sort of thing. Just off the top of our heads here, I mean, it seems to be pretty common to me, and I wonder how often that's actually photographed and we don't know about it.
I think very common. Well, more so now with you got to the Stars Academy, the Tic Tac UFOs that have been banded around and, you know, put forward, you know, and the military have been taking, I'm sure, images for a long, long time. But, you know, it's coming to the forefront now, really. But, you know, this type of footage was when I was sent it, you know, in 2014. It was a, you know, pretty wow sort of video to see.
Yes, indeed. I have questions about that, though. I don't know. I tend to be a rather untrusting person, particularly when it comes to governments and disclosure, which I think it's naive to expect full disclosure, and even if it's partial, one wonders how accurate it will be. But that's me. Just we have a few minutes before our break here. What do you think of that footage, and whether it's really on the up and up, as we might say, as far as a real attempt at some sort of honesty on the part of the Pentagon in our case?
Well, I say this a lot. I mean, being ex-military myself, for years and years, we all know pretty much that they've always researched it being of high importance to any military worldwide.
Sure.
You know, it's when I first saw the footage anyway of the Tic Tac, there was little alarm bells in my head. I still think to the Stars Academy are doing a really good job, and they've brought forward the ufology case topic really, you know, a lot faster than most of us have done over 30 years plus, you know. When I first saw the footage, the only thing that alarmed me at the time, if you look at all the readouts on the HUD display on the, I think it was an F-18 Hornet or whatever, the aircraft, down the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the word slave. Now, the word slave in military terms is another word for drone. So when I saw this footage, that was one little alarm bell that rang in my head. And again, like yourself, you know, I know the government are not so forthcoming on the ufology. It just seems to be it seems to be like a drip feed effect more now with the Stars Academy and that type of thing. But yeah, I think it's good videos, and there are more to come as well. I'm sure.
I'm wondering how much the Ferrero Company, the makers of Tic Tac, paid them to use the term Tic Tac. So anyway,
yeah.
Tongue-in-cheek there. All right, let's take our bottom of the hour break here, and you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. And we'll be right back with our fascinating guest, Jason Gleaves. Stick with us.
ON Radio. Hello, this is Manny Brando.
And this is Virginia. Together, we bring you the Manny Brando Show every Sunday morning from 9 to 10 a.m.
Excuse me, can I say a few words?
Forget it. You already said too much.
Oh, no, not again.
ON Radio, ON Worldwide.
And welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. And our guest today is Jason Gleaves, all the way from the UK via Skype. And we're talking about Jason's work analyzing UFO photos, among other things. So let's move on, Jason, if we may, to the rather interesting Los Angeles air raid photo of 1942. And for those of you who are not visually seeing us here, there is a rather standard photo of an aircraft, and in those days there were a lot of anti-aircraft batteries on the ground, and there were searchlights that would reach up into the sky and at night and try to find any sort of invading aircraft, bomber, or whatever. In this case, supposed UFO. And they would focus on this, and the anti-aircraft batteries would be able to get a shot or two off against these craft. Now, in this one, it seems to be a very strange craft, but I think Jason may have found something else about this photo. So tell us about this, please, Jason.
Yeah, again, this is another really old photograph in the realms of ufology. Again, it's in all the books, magazines, etc. So everyone should have probably seen this, you know. And it's difficult to say as in original, but it's a large cylindrical, but more elliptical shaped craft. And again, you can see the standard searchlights that are on this object over Los Angeles during 1942. And in the original photograph, you can see the artillery fire, because this thing came over Los Angeles, and it was only, I think it was 3 months into the US actually being in the Second World War. So they thought they were being attacked by either the German Luftwaffe or by the Japanese Air Force. So everybody joined in. This thing had been fired on continuous. It didn't flinch or falter or anything. You know, it didn't get damaged in any way. It didn't appear to be damaged. And again, so it was another one of those sort of photographs I got into. I wanted to really find out, was this real? What was the actual, object that was there? So again, I ran through the process, the analysing, filters, etc. And you can see in the book, I put this forward as another case in my first book, the UFO photo. And you can see, never seen before, when I run the analysis through, you can see the actual detail of the thing that we had at the time, or known to have at the time. And it was pretty unique. Again, it was quite surprising, really, after it came out originally, and it warranted to be in the book, obviously. And it's still, down to this day, as being unidentified. Okay,
I don't really know enough about it to say, but it does look pretty spectacular to me. And there were reports of this from many quarters in that time in California. So,
well, it's interesting that up until like Roswell, any sort of mysterious object that was seen in the sky, I feel like there wasn't much of a frame of reference, really, for anybody in the Americas, at least, or, well, in the United States. Because there was a really interesting case. I think it was Deborah, I'm trying to remember who it was, at the Danbury UFO conference, who was talking about the...
Linda Zimmerman.
Linda Zimmerman.
Yes.
Jeez, wow, my brain. So Linda Zimmerman, who's an amazing historian, gathered so many fascinating cases, mostly focuses specifically in the Hudson River Valley. I really enjoyed her talk too. She made a really interesting point that it was like the late 1800s, early 1900s, when a bunch of people started witnessing this, quote, giant airship that moved
particularly 1909.
very quickly, that had a spotlight that sort of shifted all over the place, and everyone was just like, oh well, it's probably the Germans doing something weird because why not? And it was super interesting that they're just like, oh well, it's just an airship, must be those Wright brothers doing something crazy, who knows?
Yeah.
And then there was sort of around Roswell in that time period,
1947.
A frame of reference started sort of appearing for mysterious objects. People were like, yeah, it's flying saucers. That's what we got.
Yeah.
That's what we have going on here. And up until that point, it's so interesting to look back at old newspaper clippings and articles and photographs, and they just say, mysterious air objects seen in sky over L.A. They had no frame of reference for it. I just think that's a little comment on my end.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I totally agree, because the science fiction films were around, but you went to the cinema to see. It's not like having a TV at home or a computer where we see all these things readily now. And science fiction being so, big, and it's a big impact, really.
Oh, yeah.
And again, at the time, it was the Second World War, so people just put down what they saw to, and they had trust in the government then as well, so they were probably, if they thought it was the government piece of equipment or aircraft, then they would just say, oh, they must be doing something right or up to good, than being up to no good.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to the next one. And the next one is quite interesting. Obviously, I'm sure an artist's conception or Jason's recreation of what happened to him. This is at RAF Cosford, Royal Air Force, British Air Force Cosford base. And this involved, first of all, where is Cosford? I haven't heard of it, Jason. And how were you involved in this? And you say Nick Pope was also involved. Nick Pope, the former official of the British Ministry of Defense, who was responsible for UFO reports. So tell us about that, please, Jason.
Yeah, this is quite a big case that happened in the UK.
Let me just describe the picture for anybody who's not seeing it. We have a garden variety crash gate you'd find at the end of a runway with a guard shack, and coming very low over it is a large triangular craft with lights at the three ends. So I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Again, the RAF Cosford is one of the Royal Air Force training camps in the UK. It's in the Midlands near Wolverhampton, Birmingham, central UK.
Okay.
So it's and again, that's where different trades go there to actually become armourers and different, other trades as well. There's a huge museum there, and in the museum there is literally every type of early aircraft, late aircraft, test aircraft, and again, I'll bring up that in a minute, because I think that's one of the reasons that the craft might have visited the base. And I was a permanent staff member at RAF Cosford at the time, so part of this scenario, the gate guard, the photograph you described is the actual gate guard, crash gate 2, which is the crash gate onto the airfield at RAF Cosford. And this happened in March 1993 in the UK, and there was a young airman who was I was on the base that night. My friend was an orderly corporal in the guard room with the guard commander and everybody else's early hours. And there was a young airman on that actual guard post, and you can imagine the airfield at that time of night was pitch black, no landing lights or anything lit up, so it's pitch black behind him. He had his new searchlight, towards the gate and things like that. And in the early hours of the morning, he radioed through to the guard commander, screaming down the radio to get the guard commander out to the airfield, because he was panicking because there was a huge triangular-shaped craft over the airfield. And this is just my illustration that I did for the book, again, that I covered, put it in the book. But it is an actual photograph of the crash gate and where it happened.
Okay. And we're going to talk about the book in a moment here, but we have a question again from Peter in Bogota, Colombia, regarding this case.
Sure. So, Peter writes to us, regarding the RAF Cosford March 1993 UFO incident, was there any missing time reported by any involved? Was any hypnotic regression done? And if so, what was the result?
Not what I know of. I'm not in contact with people from that time, so whether since they've had anything happen to them, I'm not sure. With myself, I did actually approach Mary Rodwell a year or so back at a conference here in the UK, and I'm hoping to have a regression done at some point because there's other things that have happened in my past, and I'd like to get through on my journey to the bottom of this. But this case, this craft came down anyway over the base, over the where you can see over the airfield, and the guard commander and the RAF police personnel all got in the Land Rovers and Sherpas and all drove to the guard post at the time. When they got there, they all saw this huge triangle-shaped craft. Again, it was silent, and it was described at the time to be the size of a battleship. It was huge, with lights on the corners. With I think somebody did describe there was a hum, a low hum that they could hear. This object then actually took off at high velocity, and it went to another RAF base, which was about 20 miles away, RAF Shawbury, which is a helicopter base. The on-duty air traffic controller, which again, through sources I've got, actually had people I've spoken to, and again through Nick Pope, again saw this craft or a craft of similar description coming over the airfield there, and it was firing laser-like pencil lasers down towards the ground. And the impression that the air traffic controller got at the time is that this thing was actually looking for something. That was the impression he got. It was also seen, or again, a craft of similar description was seen throughout the UK in various locations by on-duty policemen and other members of the public. And this thing was huge. It's nothing we had at the time that we know of. And again, in relation to Nick Pope, he was in Whitehall at the time. He was still working there for the MOD, and he came out the day later to interview everybody again who witnessed this large craft. Yes. And Nick does actually talk about it in his talks from time to time. And again, he said when he spoke to this young airman the day after in an interview, he said his voice was trembling still because he was that scared of what he'd actually seen. So it's a pretty unique case. I mean, people think in the UK they tend to lean towards Rendlesham Forest as being, which it was a big UFO case, but this was certainly a big, well-documented, case at the time as well.
Okay. I remember about 8 years ago, Nick sat in for Ben one time as a co-host on this show, and he talked about this case. So it rings a bell, certainly. Okay, before we move on, let's let Jason talk about his not only his amazing work, but his books, where people can find out more, social media, etc. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, well, I've got 2 books out. The first book, UFO Photo. There's a copy of it there.
There we go.
That was basically, I've done computer analysis of worldwide images through the decades, so I really wanted to bring a book out, mainly a follow-on from the UFO Only Facebook page that I've got and other things in relation to that. And I wanted to do a sort of DIY photograph image analysis book for people who are getting into ufology, and just basically telling them how I analyse photographs and showing them certain cases that can lead on to obviously the misidentifications and how people identify what they've seen and how they can go through the process themselves. That was the first book. The second book was really a follow-on from that, which was it's called the Ufology Umbrella. And again, this book is close encounters are not enough. So really I wanted to springboard from the first book onto this, which I go into the 7 separate categories of close encounters. You break them down and put cases to them and try to explain to people again, the different cases and just so they can understand really, because most people when they get into ufology, they go down this road of trying to find out what's going on. They'll look on more video, they'll watch more videos, more YouTube videos, they'll read more books, and I call it the Richard Dreyfuss syndrome. That everybody gets in ufology, that they get this mad obsession that they want to find out more information about whether they've had an experience themselves or a sighting. It seems to trigger something and they want to go down that road. So the book's really a help for people that are starting out in ufology and they want to go down that road.
Very good. And on the talking points page for the show, if you're looking at that, at the bottom we have images of the books Jason has written here, and we urge you to check those out. Okay, let's move on, if we can, Jason, to some very interesting shots here of ETs, apparently, or seemingly, and a rather cat-like alien here that you have sort of come up with another explanation for.
Yeah, well, again, I get approached by people all over the world sending me the UFO photographs, but I also get people sending me UFO extraterrestrial images, of beings that have manifested themselves, etc. And generally they're orbs. I've done a lot of work for James Gilliland and Peter Maxwell Slattery at the ESETI Ranch near Mount Adams. So I do a lot of analysing imagery for them. I advise anyone to go and take a look at their stuff because, it's really good. But again, this is just some of the images that I wanted, you asked to see some of them. So, and this is really where orbs are actually starting to manifest themselves into actual humanoid shaped beings. And again, when I analyse these in more details, you can see actual facial features within the faces of the beings themselves. And one of them actually looks quite feline, lion type, which again, the type of being that is renowned for that type of look is from the, or said to be from the Sirius constellation. So, again, you can go back to the ancient Egyptians. They worshipped the feline form. So again, in relation to those, are they connected? Are they beings that had something to do with the ancient Egyptians and, coming back again? It's just different ones, you can see.
Oh, no, when I looked at this, I thought you perhaps were suggesting that someone had photoshopped this, as it were, and put the feline face over a human. So I'm misinterpreting that then. You believe this could be genuine? That
one, yeah, genuine photograph for that case. I actually just put the face there of a lion being, a lion face for somebody to, comparison.
Okay, I get it. All right, and now below this one, if you're looking at the page or at the video here, we're looking, and for those who can't see it, some very odd, I guess it looks like a head, humanoid head, and then there's on the right apparently it says light ship, some sort of craft, and there's a woman who apparently has said she took these inside a craft during an abduction, which would be a pretty neat trick. Since my understanding is most people are paralyzed or are not able to have any muscle function at the time. So tell us about this, please, Jason.
Yeah, this was one I analysed again. It was a lady called Marie Kayali in the UK here. And again, I'd advise anyone to see any of her videos and things like that. Some of the photographs she's actually sent me of craft, in comparison to buildings around and things like that. You can actually, for perspective, you can get really good image analysis done of them. But this one, she said she took on a mobile when she was taken on board the craft, and she said later on she wasn't, like you said, most people when they go, they're actually put in some sort of a trance, or, they're actually frozen and they can't move, or different types of encounters. And she said later on in their encounters that she could actually move. They didn't restrain her or anything. And she took the photograph of these beings that, I can interpret them as being some kind of being. And again, she said when she was taken back home, she leant out the window, and that was the photograph of the light ship that was actually accelerating away. She managed to get a shot of it.
What did she use to take these photos?
A mobile phone.
A mobile phone. Oh, okay. All right.
She used the camera on a mobile phone, she said.
Okay. Huh. Interesting that it didn't malfunction. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So, and that's it for our photos from this particular collection. And just below that, Ben, if you want to show that, we have images of Jason's books, and we ask you to check those out. Again, published by Flying Disc Press, good friends of ours. And if we now, did you, Jason, have a chance to look at the video that we captured in Pennsylvania in May? Ben, I bet if you scroll down, you can come to the May 26th show there.
I didn't. I did send you a message trying to get it. I didn't see the actual footage.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, that's our. Well, we'll get that to you, and I think certainly we'll be doing more shows with you, because there's a lot of interest in this subject by people. There was one I sent you this morning. I know that is way too short as far as notice is concerned, from our California show reporter, Rick, who took one over, and that's right below that, Ben. Took one over Haywood, California in June, and I'm sure it's too much to expect that you've had a chance to take a look at that. But we will deal with that also in a future show, and people can look at that on the page.
Yeah.
Okay. So also, if you could, I'm wondering here if you could talk a little bit more about your social media presence, where people can find out what you're working on in the future.
Yeah, I've got the Facebook page, which I really it stemmed from my encounters and my experiences, and I went down the road of actually wanting to know more, and I sort of self-taught on the visual analysing of photographs, and it was really all part of my journey that it sort of came from, sort of thing. So so UF Only was sort of brought into the realms, and again I was posting analysed images that I'd done, and then people started to contact me, and it just sort of grew from there. And then I needed to, obviously I was analysing footage for people, but I couldn't put them on Facebook, so I had to set up a YouTube channel so I could actually put them on there. And I've actually started doing a couple of documentaries now, so I'll actually get people who have had experiences. I've done one on Peter Maxwell Slattery, I've done one on Tony Toppin, I've done one on the extraterrestrial route racers that they've always walked amongst us, and they're all free. Everything's free on there. I don't charge anybody to actually see any of these things. I want people to see, the information, if that's what they require. They don't have to believe anything that I put there. It's really, they can watch it and make up their own mind and do their own research into it.
Yeah, that's our approach too. Okay, just we have about another minute here. Have you noticed any patterns? We always look for patterns, whether it be certain kinds of photos that seem to be clustered in one time period, or areas where photos come from, geographically speaking, or just patterns in the kinds of craft that are being seen, or if they are craft. What say you?
I think they go in decades for certain types of shaped craft, especially. I mean, we can go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s. We're talking the disc-shaped craft, the bell-shaped craft that people saw. And, I'm not saying they didn't see other types at the time, but that was sort of the thing. And then we go into the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s especially, with a lot of triangular-shaped craft, especially the RAF Cosford incident and, the Belgian flap, where the military in Belgium actually followed a UFO, a triangular-shaped UFO. And again, we go on to the elongated thing. But now, I would say we're actually going into more orb-shaped craft that we're seeing in the skies around the chemtrails, that type of thing. And again, people, put those forward. I think it does go through the decades, they change, but I'm not saying that people haven't seen different types of craft throughout the ages, And again, with people having having mobile phones now, and especially modern mobile phones have got 4K cameras, so people have always said in the past that we're seeing less people. I personally think we're seeing more. Whether people are faking them or not, I don't like that word fake. I'd rather say it's misidentified.
Okay.
Yeah, whether it's a weather phenomenon or it's a bird or an aircraft especially, And again, there are cases I put forward for people where there's a Brazilian airline pilot who was on vacation in the UK, and Philip Mantle actually presented 2 images for me to analyse for him, and I put them in the first book. And when I actually went in, long story short, analysed them, went into great detail like I do for all my images, I actually found they were 2 military fighter jets. But when you see the original photograph that were taken, they just look like disc-shaped objects. They really do. But when you
Jason, I'm afraid we're out of time, but we'll be doing more shows. And thank you very much, and we will be in touch off the air. Okay, folks, I have to acknowledge the folks at the KRI Center for Consciousness Studies in Stratham, New Hampshire, which sadly closed as of yesterday. Ben's mom and I went up for the farewell gathering on Friday evening, so many old friends, including many who have appeared on our live panel broadcast from there over the years. Other venues for their programs and experiencer support forums will be announced soon, and we'll keep you posted on that. So,
righty. So you can check out our books at including Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, and Behind the Paranormal 2, Bigfoot, Mothman, and Monsters You've Never Heard of. And now, Dancing Past the Graveyard, Poltergeists, Parasites, Parallel Worlds, and God. They're available from online retailers and in some stores, but for autographed copies, please visit the online bookstore at BehindTheParanormal.com.
And we've completed the year 2011 as far as from now back to 2011, uploading shows from our almost 12 years on the air now to the major podcast platforms, so check those out. We're doing 2010 now. We're going to get those uploaded as soon as possible. What do we have for next week, Ben?
So next week, December 8th, that we will have an exceptionally weird subject. The one that created major debate in the early Christian churches. Will Satan eventually be saved? With our guest, theologian Dr. David Bentley Hart.
Not a question you hear every day. So anyway, we leave you this afternoon with a terrifyingly deep quote from American artist and author Saul Luckman. Contrary to popular misconception, karma has nothing to do with punishment and reward. It exists as part of our holographic universe's binary or dualistic operating system, only to teach us responsibility for our creation, and all things we experience are our creations.
Still got a few seconds here, by the way.
Okay, well, I often wonder, in the holographic theory, which is a variation on our ideas, who or what is doing the projecting of the hologram?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting idea. Something to definitely mull over, especially when we sort of segue into next week's show.
Yes, exactly. So, all right, this is Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall catch you next time on Behind the Paranormal.